Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And today we are starting Thessalonians, First Thessalonians, which is the greetings from Paul. And if you've been following along with us, what we're doing is we're doing this chronologically, and because we're doing that, we hit into pieces of Acts. Acts actually covers a very long time span that Luke writes about in that, and so we see that in what we've been looking at in the second missionary journey of Paul, where he comes in contact goes into Thessalonica, and it helps establish a church there, but then he has to leave, and so we're going to look into some of that when we're studying First Thessalonians, and so this is going to just basically cover today the intro into Thessalonians and give you a little bit of background as to why Paul wrote the letter, and then we'll get into it a little bit more tomorrow. So just to do this verse real quick, 1 Thessalonians 1:1, it says, "This letter is from Paul, Silas, and Timothy. We are writing to the church in Thessalonica, to you who belong to God, the Father, and the Lord Jesus Christ. May God give you grace and peace." And so just to kind of give you a little bit of background, ancient letters, though, very similar to how some how we write our letters today, but back then, ancient letters began with the name of the author, right? The name of the recipients, and a salutation. Paul, Silas, and Timothy were the founders of this church, and they were all, kind of, this was, although the letters from Paul himself, we see that most of it seems to be coming from Paul. It looks like Silas and Timothy had input into the letter as well. And so all three of them are listed as the authors, and they were also the founders of the church. So it's like, hey, this is a letter from all of us to you, because we're not with you right now. And if you look, in what we studied, um, you know, Timothy and Silas had come back from Thessalonica and had given the word to Paul about what how well they were doing, and so Paul writes a letter of encouragement to them, and we're going to look at that. And so, First Thessalonians provides a look into the life and struggles of a new congregation of believers. And so the thing here, though, with this new congregation, unlike most of the ones that Paul was able to establish, he was able to spend a lot of time there. But I don't believe we have the exact reasons why, but he had to leave. Part of it was persecution and stuff like that, but he had to leave Thessalonica pretty quickly. And so these newcomers were greatly disadvantaged because their founders, or the founder or founders of their church, were absent. So it'd be like someone going in, planning a church, and then just leaving, and without sticking around and help establish the church, help establish leadership, help establish everything. They weren't able to do that in this case. Timothy and Silas were able to stick around for a little bit, but not like they had been with a lot, like the churches in Galatia and other stuff like that. And so with all that going on, the new believers were experiencing great hostility from within their own countrymen because of their faith. And we're going to look at some of that in First Thessalonians as well. And so Paul believed and wrote, and I think was correct, that they were under attack by Satan the tempter. We'll look at that, who had also hindered him from visiting them again. He was trying to get back to them, but hadn't been able to get back to visit and help build up the church there. And so we see that the Thessalonians, right, or the Thessalonians were at a disadvantage compared to most of the churches that Paul had set up with Barnabas and Silas and the other ones. They tended to be able to spend, a series of time, sometimes up to 18 months, with them. But with this case, he wasn't able to, and so he was worried that. So when Timothy returned from visiting him, Paul was overjoyed to discover that the Thessalonians were exhibiting the character of people truly converted to Christ. He was worried that because they didn't get to kind of establish that foundation, that maybe they weren't going to be able to do that. But their lives were marked by faith, love, and hope, and we're going to see that as we go through and read this book. And not only that, they had helped to spread the good news throughout the surrounding regions. So not only were they thriving, they were spreading the message to the surrounding regions and growing the church. And so they've become examples for other believers of the true faith amidst their suffering, amidst their persecution. And so we're going to look at that, and Paul's talks about how wonderful they are and how great it is that their faith is so strong and that they're living the way they are. And we're going to look at that as we go through this. And so this is kind of just a small introduction into Thessalonians, right? He's writing to them as a letter of encouragement because he knows he had to leave them sooner than he wanted to. He wasn't able to give them the full attention that he wanted to be able to. he was able to leave Timothy and Silas there for a little while, but they've visited or come back, and now so Paul's giving this letter to write back to them, and so it's a good letter. It's unlike a lot of the other ones where Paul's having to write to them to get on to them. This one is he's writing to them to encourage them and say and lift them up because of how well they're doing. So I hope y'all really enjoy this going through Thessalonians here. I think you'll learn a lot from it. Like I said, I always do. Every time I go through something new or go through these, I learn from them even more, pick up things that I just didn't pick up before, and I hope you do the same. So if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to our channel, do that, because that way we can, you get the notifications when we do these. We post these daily. If you find these useful and find these helpful, then I ask that you share them with others, help them. We want to spread this message, our messages, as much as we possibly can. And as always, I just appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch them.